In Module 5, we're now going to look at what it takes to actually deliver the promised value that many enterprises look for in a cloud platform. When you talk to line of business, they will actually tell you what they want from their IT department. They want to be able to bring new applications to market very quickly. They want to be able to innovate, offer new services. They want to do this very quickly. They want to do it in a matter of weeks, not months. They often see the IT department as not being very responsive, not being very agile. So what they want from the cloud is the ability to be innovative, to be fast to market, and to not be held up by their IT department. A developer wants to be released from having to manage, configure, operate a complex environment. They just want to be able to write the code, test their code, and deliver the code. They want to use the languages that they feel most comfortable with. They want to use the best tools for the job. They don't want to be constrained by a very rigorous set of IT processes. When you talk to a lot of companies, they have a software process, which is a pipeline, and it usually is a very sequential pipeline. And it's often not that responsive. So Bluemix can fit into this process. It can offer value. It can release the developers from having to manage their own test environments. It can release the operations team from having to set up and configure and maintain the infrastructure. But you're still not going to get the agility that the line of business wants. So what does it take to actually move into a way of creating applications that give you that agility? So the first thing is really, who are you writing the application for? Do you understand how you design your applications? If you put the user at the heart of that process, you're likely to end up with a better application that meets the user's need. The next thing you need to look at is, how do you go about creating your application? Do you have an agile-based methodology at the heart of your development process? Do you have the right tooling, processes, and end-to-end lifecycle for your application in a DevOps environment? And do you have the right architecture for your application to run successfully on a cloud platform? So we're going to look at each one of these in a little bit more detail. So the first thing is actually working out what it is you want to deliver. And design thinking is a good way of doing that. And IBM's taken that one step further with our IBM design thinking process, where we've added some additional steps. So with our hills, we need to look at who is it that we're writing the application for? What is it they want to achieve? And how do we add that wow factor into the application? How do we get them to love the application, to really want to use it, to think it's the greatest thing? Then we look at who is it that we're actually writing for? And we want to get sponsored users. We want to get real business users in here, not what the IT department thinks an end user needs. So having sponsored users from the business or from your customers is a really good way of making sure that you are designing for your top end market. And then the last part is playbacks. Go through what you're designing. Tell the story. Does it deliver what you want it to deliver? The next thing we're going to look at is the Agile process, the Agile methodology to actually create the application. I put on this slide some details from Wikipedia of what they define Agile to be. When I talk to developers, a lot of developers don't really get Agile. They don't understand that it's not just shortcuts when you're developing. Agile methodologies are very rigorous sets of practices built around the Agile principles. So things like test-driven development, things like paired programming, these are all designed to allow you to write quickly, in a sustainable pace, and really be an agile development team. There are a number of different agile methodologies available, so pick one that meets your needs. The next item is DevOps Services. Now, when you use the term DevOps Services, there are many different definitions. It started by getting the developers and the operation team to adopt similar practices and to work closer together. But today it really covers the entire software lifecycle, from the initial inception of the project right the way through the design, the development, the maintenance, through to the retirement. And DevOps Services and the processes has to cover not just the development, not just the operations, but we also need to embrace the quality, the software quality assurance, to make sure that as we go through that process, it is an agile process, but it's also delivering a quality product at the end of the process. So Bluemix allows you to create a DevOps pipeline. You can use the built-in tooling, or you can use external toolings to create the DevOps pipeline to meet your development needs. And then the last area is architecture. When I look at Bluemix and how it manages an application, you have to architect your application in a certain way to allow it to be managed by the platform. When you also want to be agile, you need to think about how the architecture impacts the development process. So if I have a large monolithic application, that's difficult to manage, that's difficult to be agile with. There's a lot of interdependencies, it takes a lot of testing, and it's really difficult to have independent teams working on that single monolithic application. If I adopt microservices, I can then break down that monolithic application into a number of components that have a fixed purpose. I can then scale those different services in the best way for that service. I can then link those together in the best way. I can load balance against them in the best way, but I can also then make my development team more productive by allowing them to work independently on these individual services. So having the correct architecture can really help you be agile and to deliver in the cloud platform. There's an article or a set of rules that will really help you write an application that works very well on Cloud Foundry. It was created by one of the founders of the Heroku cloud, and it really does work well against a modern platform as a service. I'm not going to take you through all of these, but it's a site worth looking at. It includes things like don't use local file system resources, don't store configuration within your code. All of these things will help you create an application that works well with Bluemix and within your DevOps process.